Hello everyone and welcome to episode number 3. I'm your host Lavi and this is my co-host the KOV. So, Kov, welcome back. Here we are again, episode number 3. How are you doing?
Very fine, sir. Thank you.
Very nice. Okay. So, guys,
Very formal start.
Very formal start, of course. Last time, guys, we got a comment about someone asking about stone dials. So, you ask, we deliver. We're going to dive right into it. I'm going to start with the wrist check. KOV, what did you decide for today?
I'm wearing my personal 1601, so it's not for sale. Many people have asked because we did list it on our Instagram channel once, but just as not for sale as my personal collection. And it's also on our website in a museum page. So you can check it out over there if you want to learn more about this specific watch. It's a 1601 in white gold, dating back to the 1970s. And it has a hardstone dial, which is the topic of today. In this case, a red brownish jasper, which happens to be my name. So that's convenient.
It is. Is that why it's your favorite stone dial? Or?
Is it my favorite stone dial?
I don't even know. Is it your favorite stone dial?
It's very hard to choose. I have many favorites, and I think in this video we will walk past them. Depending on the configuration and period, I prefer one stone or the other. So it's quite elaborate. It's not easy to pick out one because there's just so many variety. And that's also what I love with stone dials, because they're basically unique by default. True. I mean, it's Mother Nature who created them, so they all have a different pattern, different, let's say, canvas on the dial with inclusions or color scheme. And I hope this video, we can make it as concise as possible, because the information...
It's quite elaborate.
It's elaborate, and I want to present it as dense as possible and not to go too much in depth, but keep it a little bit superficial, because in the end, the value is in the aesthetics and in the emotion, and not so much the intrinsic value of the stones. Because, I mean, this slab of stone, yes, if you were to buy it on a market, it's fucking 2-3 euros, right?
Yeah, true.
So, as a dial, it's... whatever number, it's
yes,
quite subjective, the value, but it's over 100k for sure.
Absolutely.
So that's interesting to note.
True, and we will be showing some cool, I think we're going to really show a lot of cool examples we've been dealing with or that we've sold in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Before we jump into the variety of stones that we have, I'll start with what I'm wearing today. I'm wearing today an Onyx Dial. I find it the most perfect entry into the vintage world, because you have a completely black dial. It's super nice. I think we kind of had the best push of these configurations back in the day. We sold tens, if not 20,
dozens.
Like dozens. Yeah, absolutely.
We actually never used to list them online because they were so popular, and then the website jammed and stuff like that. It was annoying. But more Onyx dials have come onto the market, so I think perhaps the demand softened a little bit,
yes,
but they're still one of the most aesthetically pleasing ones for sure.
I agree. And I think if you're more into modern watches and you want to jump into the vintage world, this is the perfect leeway to do so, as the design is super sleek. You have no numerals on the dial. I love that. You find them in different configurations, such as I think we have sold a platinum one, a white gold one. You find it in Datejust. You have it in DayDates. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I it's one of my favorite DayDates. Just go to a DayDate configuration to have. Yeah, I just love it.
It's really jet black, and that's what makes it so exciting to see. And you pointed out a good thing about the Onyx one. It's a nice gateway into vintage. As you can see, many people that appreciate modern watches, or even famous people like Karim Benzema, who has like a lot of modern Pateks and 40mm ones and stuff like that. And he also wears this one quite a lot. So I do think there are very few people in this world who do not enjoy the aesthetics of the vintage DayDate with an Onyx dial. And it is something you cannot find in the current catalog.
True. I think they do have, I believe they do have a Onyx stone, but it has some sort of stripe on it.
Yes, but also the difference is this one is of course very simplistic, so there's no markers on it, which makes it stand out quite a bit. And that is what people also very much enjoy, and you don't find that in the current lineup with Rolex. So therefore I think it's easy to go to an Onyx one, also because it's one of the least rare, even though it's one of the most popular stone dials. You just don't see them enough, unfortunately, because they're hard to get in a good condition. Yeah, exactly.
Sure. I think value for money wise, they're also really good. You can find one for around 40K. That's what we list them for. We can find them. Of course, condition is everything.
Yeah.
And when you look at this example, it is stunning.
Because with stones, they're quite fragile. And so if we're going to jump into the topic.
Let's jump into the stones, yeah.
Yeah. They're quite fragile, and that's one of the reasons actually that they opted oftentimes for dials without markers, because setting the markers, applying pressure to get the sertissage might crack the dial. It also happened on many occasions. So it wasn't necessarily an aesthetic choice, but more a pragmatic choice by Rolex to not have the markers on. So also if you take a look at the first batches of stone dials, they started in the late 60s approximately. And up until 1978, it was only an option for precious metal Datejust.
Okay.
And the DayDate had to wait for like another decade. So the DayDate stone dials, they introduced them in 1978, only probably because they need to carve out an extra window, and that was quite a fragile, or the stone is quite fragile. Yeah, it's quite a hard operation to do. So early on, they only had the Datejust in precious metal, optionally with stone dials. Okay. A couple stone dials. We will decipher what stone dials are possible later on in this video. But they started out with the Datejust 36 millimeter. Later on they added the ladies variant. But the lady Datejust. Yeah. Yes. But our experience there is way smaller because they're not so prevalent in the collector's world. They're gaining traction though. Female collectors like them. Out there, yeah. Exactly. But let's focus on the 36 millimeter ones because that's our forte and we have the most experience there. And therefore we compiled kind of a research that has been useful in this by our experience and also my background as a gemologist. It might come in handy. So let's start off by defining what is a stone dial, because it is a product of modern nature, but not necessarily a product of modern nature should be a stone dial, because you have of course the mother of pearl dial, which is the most known Rolex natural dial, let's say, which doesn't qualify as a stone dial. On the other hand, you also have the wood dials, which are also very appealing, I feel. Sometimes they can be, but they also do not qualify as a stone dial by our terminology. And then lastly, you have gem set dials, but we also disqualify them because we're talking only about the dial being made of a solid slab of stone. Which is aesthetically the most pleasing to us as well. Well, I do not necessarily agree. Like more stone compared to like the gem set on it, yeah. I mean, a pavé dial or a honeycomb pavé dial can be even nicer than a regular Onyx dial or Tiger Eye dial. Regardless, so these are the stone dials. They started off with the Datejust, then Lady Datejust and Daydates. And the Datejust and the Daydates, the 36 ones, that's where we're gonna focus. And on the Daydates, so what do you like more, a Datejust or a Daydate with a stone dial? I've changed of opinion quite often, as I do. I would say the Datejust has more stone, like you've mentioned it yourself. You have the day window, so you have more stone, you have more enjoyment of the slab of stone. A Daydate is just more of a pleasing model to me. I would say I lean more towards a Daydate. So I would prefer, for example, a bloodstone white gold Daydate or a lapis lazuli. I love that as well on a Daydate for me personally. Yeah, but there's no Daydate with plexi crystal that has a stone dial. True. So with the Daydates, they started it at the 18XXX series, so with the 5 digits, so with sapphire crystals. Yes, so for me, my real love is in the plexi crystal models, and then you have the Datejust, which are also the most scarce and hardest to find in perfect condition, because you mentioned it before. And again, I want to emphasize the condition of the dial is of utmost importance. Exactly. So they tend to crack, or you know, you'll get some fine hairlines. Oftentimes this happens when bad watchmakers dismount the dials or mount it back in, stuff like that. What's also interesting to see is even on the 4-digit one, so the Datejust, the dials are mounted by dial feet, whilst back in the days on the regular dials it was like a cap, because they were capped because it was a pipe, and so they're on the movement, and these have dial feet. So there's a difference there, and therefore they're also not interchangeable with their 5-digit counterpart. So you cannot take a 4-digit Datejust lapis dial and put it in a 5-digit Datejust lapis dial, because it wouldn't fit. Now talking about the sequence, so if we take a look at gradually how designs changed. Firstly, up until 1978, you didn't have any stone dials with markers for the aforementioned reason, and then they shifted also to the DayDate, and a lot of has been said about the signing at the bottom of the dial.
Yes,
yours
true.
has T Swiss T,
T-Swiss T, yeah.
which is the earliest signing. So all the early stone dials, all the Datejust 4-digit have T Swiss T, and they started the Datejust 5-digit, also only precious metal, and the DayDates with T Swiss T too. Now many people say, why does it say T Swiss T? Even some people that have no cognizance about watches, and I do understand their point, say, well, this watch is fake because it says T Swiss T and there's no tritium on the dial.
Yeah.
Why is that? Well, I will tell you, it's twofold.
A period or something, or is it?
Well, it can be, firstly, it can be tritium in the hands.
Okay.
Usually they're supplied with closed hands, so no tritium inside, because there are also no tritium markers. But secondly, the cliches they used, the tampon, the pad printing, was the same cliche that they used that period. So it just had T Swiss T, just like the non-lume dials that were delivered to Japan and stuff. They also say T Swiss T. Why? Because the application of tritium was the last part before the dial got shipped or delivered or mounted into a watch.
So they completed the dial just before the...
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it always said T Swiss T. Then later on they shifted to Swiss, and lastly Swiss made. And then people always want like exact data and configuration, like, oh, in 1983 they changed to Swiss, and then to Swiss made in 1987. But this isn't the case.
No.
With Rolex, it's not that, 1st of January 1983, all the dials we already made with Swiss, we're gonna, get them out and replace them with all Swiss made dials.
Yeah, it's an often made mistake with Rolex, but of course they produced many numbers of certain
True,
prints
but
or dials.
for example, with Submariners or GMTs, there's a more specified transition, and that you can place it in serial batches. But with these dials were often later ordered or later put in even at the ADs because they had them on stock. If somebody wanted an option, like they were buying a DayDate and they said, I really want something special, and they had the dial still in stock, they would mount it in.
A newer,
exactly, and they would give it. So you can have a 1983 dial saying Swiss, whilst you can also have a watch from 1986 saying T Swiss T, whilst the T Swiss T was the earlier variation.
Yeah.
But it might have been mounted later into that dial,
yeah.
Into that watch. So that is an important thing to notice.
So you can't conclude necessarily that the Swiss or T Swiss T is relatively correct with a certain period.
No, but you have to use your common sense. For example, Swiss made dials weren't made up until the mid 90s.
Okay.
So if that Swiss made dial would be in a watch from 1982, for sure it's been replaced.
Yes, okay. Yeah.
Now, oftentimes this doesn't even matter so much. For example, with the Onyx Dial you're wearing, there has been some debate about the signatures.
Yeah.
So they started with T Swiss T, then Swiss made. But Swiss made also has two batches. It has a service dial batch that has slightly different graphics. I'm not gonna tell everything, but take a look at the shape of the O in Oyster, for example.
Yes.
And a service dial that was also often mounted because you could still order them up until rather recently. People don't really care. There's not much price difference there in the Onyx
world. I would say it doesn't really
matter. People like the aesthetics, and it's an original dial. So rather, if it's mounted in a good condition watch is better than in a bad condition watch, but period correct.
Yes,
people don't really care about that, and nor do I so much. There are also two generations to distinguish more easily. The first generation that has sloped and faceted aperture, so both the day and the date window have sloped and faceted apertures, and the later ones have a 90 degrees and more smooth finished, smooth finish on the upside, and a very sharp edge, let's say, and all the service dials also have the sharp edge, but it isn't necessarily a service dial if it has
that aperture.
Exactly, but it's also not per se the period. So some people claim, in 1999 they have a Swiss-made Onyx. So a Swiss-made Onyx in the 1999 is not a service dial, but it can still be the service dial.
True.
Right. So that's an important connotation to understand these dials and how they were delivered. Now you also have differences regarding the signature depending on the markers.
Yes.
Because of course you have the ones with no markers that are most valuable and most beloved. And secondly, you have the one with either a certissage, so a diamond set, or with Roman numerals. The Roman numerals are easier because they're applied on top of it. Some dials only have the ones with no Roman numerals. But the certissage, there are holes drilled in, and they're put into the dial in 3 different configurations, either 11 diamonds, so except for the coronet at 12 o'clock, and you have it with the square setting, you have it with the square setting or the round called pinball setting. Then you have the 6 and 9 diamond setting that not a lot of people are very fond of. Sometimes it can be.
You still have a lot of stone, I would say.
Sometimes it can be cool. Okay, so now we have a general picture of these stone dials, and these configurations. Now they're applied. The slab of stone is applied with a material called chrysocolla, like it's some sort of, they mix it with the glue and they apply it on a base dial and it's put into the watch. But now, of course, the most important part is to determine or to see the specific dial we are talking about. Yes. And I did make a small note because I don't want to leave out too many dials, so I have it here. But first,
the type of dials we can.
Yes. But first, let me address some misconceptions about the varieties and the names. For example, the bloodstone, it can be somewhat subjective. For example, a bloodstone is a green jasper with red inclusions called hematite inclusions. So this bloodstone is a nickname for another stone that's called the heliotrope, which is a chalcedony variety that's opaque. So an opaque chalcedony variety, depending on the qualities, could be considered a jasper. Okay. So if you have a bloodstone dial, you could either name it a bloodstone, it would be correct. You could name it a heliotrope dial, it would be correct. You could name it a green jasper dial with hematite inclusions, which is correct. Yeah. And you could name it a chalcedony dial, which also would be correct.
Because it's all part of the same.
Yeah. So it's rather subjective, but it's not that every chalcedony dial is a jasper dial. Okay. But every jasper dial is in fact by extension a chalcedony dial. Okay. You understand? Yes, I do. So that's how gemology works. So sometimes people are like, no, you're wrong, this is that, this is this. Well, it's a little bit subjective depending on the qualities of the stone.
And the inclusions, I guess, that's in there.
Exactly. Some are made for yellow gold models, some are made for white gold models, very few are made for stainless steel models. For example, the sodalite, they made it for the Datejust in stainless steel, but most are made for precious metal. They were options, and therefore we also included these very interesting from the master catalog, with some varieties here. And this is the dial code chart where you could order dials at additional costs. So again, let's say you have a watch from 1980 and somebody would walk in 1990 and order these dials or whatever, you would have a different generation. Exactly. So it's not math that always adds up in terms of the generations of dials being mounted in certain watches. So are you ready to go into the dials?
I am, absolutely. We have sold some wonderful examples.
Yeah.
We have come across some wonderful examples. I'd say we would start, like you're wearing the red jasper. Mm-hmm. Perhaps we can start with some configurations we've sold on that, like in the yellow.
Well, I thought let's do it alphabetically so I won't leave anything out.
That's a good one.
I made my list alphabetically, so
that's a good one.
So I don't leave anything out. If that's okay by you.
100%. Let's do that.
And again, I want to emphasize there's a difference also in value for the metal it's made. So the white gold varieties are way more valuable because they're more rare, and you can't just swap them out because oftentimes they have a color matching printing on basically all of them. Some have a black printing.
Yes, I guess black can be seen on both.
Yeah, so for example, coral dial, that's a little bit tricky because it's one of the most valuable, but one could potentially take out the apertures and coronet with if a coral dial has the black printing, and then put the white coronet on and the white apertures, and then it's a white gold one, and you added successfully a couple 10,000 to 100,000 jewels. Yeah. So be careful always. We're going to start with aventurine, which is only available with the second generation apertures, so with the straight edges on the apertures. I would also suggest our good friend Dario behind the camera to add all the pictures of all these watches we've sold.
Oh, business always goes on, people.
Yeah, so you have the T-Swiss T pinball setting there and the applied Roman numerals. There's no aventurine known without any markers on it, except for one that sold at Antiquorum, I think last year, which was also for a white gold one.
Yes.
And I wasn't able to attend the auction weekend that year, but I saw the pictures and I'm very, let's say 99% sure it's not an original one. And it fetched a pretty serious price, so
yes,
very much,
things,
be careful. One of the most famous fake stone dials that was sold initially by Philips at the glamorous DayDate auction in 2015, which was the opal dial, which I had the pleasure to examine from up close. And then later on it was sold by Christie's, I think a year or two later, or maybe a year later, at Christie's Dubai, both fetching close to 100K. That dial was absolutely fake, so always be careful again.
Do your due diligence.
Exactly. Now, next one is the B. So we're gonna go to the bloodstone. Bloodstone, I would like to emphasize, has to be green and it has to have these inclusions of hematite. So it has to have these red spots, therefore it's known as bloodstone. If it's green without spots, it's a green jasper.
Right? Then it's green jasper.
Exactly.
Of course. So if it's completely.
But a bloodstone is a
thing,
green jasper.
True.
You understand?
Yes,
but it's
I
a
do.
variety of green jasper. So the bloodstone, they started out in already the DayDate series in both. So with the green dial, and they have the DayDate series in the 5-digit with the green dial and the hematite inclusions. Yes. And the DayDate they made also both for white and yellow gold, and also the DayJust is made for white and yellow gold, exactly.
Yeah. We sold a beautiful 18039 white gold bloodstone.
That was spectacular. Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah, those are spectacular. There's even a 16019 known in with bloodstone dial. There are two known. One is damaged to bits, which is terrible, but the other one still is in existence and in a collection of a client of ours.
Fairness, it's still collectible.
Exactly. Without the markers are most prevalent in a collector's world, but you also have the one with applied Roman numerals or the pinball setting that we also occasionally have. So next up is the Cachalon, and Cachalon is basically a white opal.
The white brother of the Onyx, I would say.
Yeah, you can mention it like that. Yeah. I don't know why, but
because it's completely white, I would say, and then you have black as Onyx. You have the similar configurations with diamond setting. And
okay, fair play.
That's how I call it.
Sure, but you don't have a plain one, Cachalon.
That would be amazing.
You only have diamond set, so you have either the 11 diamonds or the one with the 6 and 9 diamond that is most often seen as the service dial, and not necessarily again. And they made it also mainly for yellow gold. They started using Cachalon only in the 90s, so it's a later one. Therefore only second generation apertures, but they made very few with white gold, which is very cool because it's white on white.
Okay. So there is a white gold configuration.
Yes,
cool,
but
cool.
not often seen. So the next one with the C is the coral, and the colors for the gentlemen range from orange to really a pinkish color.
Pink, yeah, okay.
With the ladies, they had multiple varieties, also yellow coral, for example.
Yes.
But with the gentleman watches, you have to be very, very cautious. As I mentioned before, you could swap out the apertures if it had the black text and make it convert it into a white gold one. They only exist with the first generation apertures, so with the slopes. Okay. But there's a cool exception here that you don't see with many stone dials, which is the pyramid stone dial.
Yes.
So you have this pyramid finishing that you can also see on some regular dials. They did it for a very short period of time, but they also did it actually with coral dials. They are very rare and they have the pinball diamond setting. It's an interesting variety to notice.
Is it this form of, because it's probably
carving,
very fragile. So
yeah, it's
carve it out from the
so they made it with coral, they made it with onyx, and they made it with lapis lazuli. These three stones, they had the pyramid sertissage option as a possibility.
Okay, and they're the most rare and valuable executions of those certain dials? Or mostly
not
with coral?
Per se. With coral, well, it depends really what your preference has, because these do have the diamond markers, and the diamond marker stone dials are always slightly less valuable because there's slightly less demand. Yes. So I think it depends on what your personal preference would be. Okay. Up next is Carnelian. Is more often referred to as Carnelian, but actually on the stone dial chart, Rolex referred to it as Carnelian, which is a reddish chalcedony. One might also name this Carnelian because this is a chalcedony. Again, this is red jasper, but the variety is that red jasper has to be opaque. Yeah. Carnelian has to be translucent. So we've had one They reintroduced this, by the way, in 2023 in their
Yes,
DayDate model.
true, they did.
But we've had one, and I think it might be the only one that might qualify as Carnelian. It was found by me. It was then sold by Ramon to a gentleman collector, and it has so it's a 4-digit Datejust, and you can also see like the real vibrant red color
It's
with
a
some
different red than
for sure.
the standard red jasper.
And the depth, because it's slightly more translucent,
Yes.
and you can see like white veins and orangey stuff in it. It's
amazing.
spectacular.
That is a spectacular piece. We'll show some pictures.
Yes, perhaps the most valuable. I would say it would be the most valuable stone dial that has ever surfaced.
Especially
in my humble opinion.
In our collection.
Yeah, it's the most valuable we've actually handled. Up next is ferrite, which is an iron oxide, so it's arguable it should be in here, but it's very cool, and it's also mentioned in the charts by Rolex that it's a stone dial.
Yes. We've sold some examples.
Yeah,
with ferrite.
but only in the 90s it was available, or late 80s, 90s, so only the second generation slopes. Now up next is grossular, which is red again, which is a variety of garnet, and you shouldn't misplace this with the red variety of tourmaline, which is rubellite. They made both. Exactly. They used both. However, rubellite were only introduced in 2000 after Rolex stopped producing the 5-digit Day-dates. So the grossular has to be seen with the second generation apertures only. With the pinball setting you have it too. Square diamond setting with the 6 and the 9, you can see it mostly service dials.
Very nice. I like this stone.
Yeah, and you have it in both yellow gold and white gold, whilst for example the ferrite is only known to have it in yellow gold.
Yeah. Did they also make this in Daytona? Grossular? Or am I
yes,
mistaken?
You're actually very right. They also used it in Daytona, so they used multiple stones also on different models. For example, King Midas used lapis dials and coral dials. We're going to focus here actually on the Day-dates and Datejust, but they actually used it also, for example, on the Submariner. So 16618 has one variety with an onyx, so also jet black, which isn't that far apart of the regular 16618. However, it had a framed aperture, of course, because it's a stone dial. And you have the lapis lazuli on 16618.
True.
Which is very fun.
Is very cool.
Yeah. Up next is howlite. People often misuse the term here. They call it marble, but it's not. This one only exists in one variety, and that is the second generation aperture, and it has the Roman numerals. Now jasper. So we already mentioned this stone. There are many varieties. You have the red jasper and the green jasper to start off with. Those are the most used. You can see them in the 4-digit Datejust. Then for the 5-digit, they dropped the red jasper as a whole. Yes. So you only had the green jasper made for both white gold and yellow gold, both Datejust and Day-date.
Very, very nice though.
We're almost there. Hang on.
One of my favorites.
The lapis lazuli.
Yes.
You love that?
I love that.
Lapis lazuli has the most varieties alongside the onyx one. It was the most prevalent in their catalog.
Yes.
Diamond settings, Datejust, Day-dates, white gold, yellow gold, no markers. You had everything basically here, including the Certissage pyramid. So many varieties. So and what I like about it is here you can really see the differences because of the color scheme with the calcite and pyrite inclusions. Calcite being the white and pyrite being the yellow inclusions.
You do find some often configurations or like dials where the calcite is not seen, right? Where you barely have any white in it.
True. Yeah.
Or like
Those are very appealing to me too. I just noticed that I forgot about it because I mentioned pyrite, which is not on the list. But pyrite is actually also a stone dial.
Oh yes, true.
Known as fool's gold.
Yeah.
So this is also a stone dial, which I had like 3 days to make this list. So
I was a bit late with the schedule.
Sorry for that. If I forgot something, it's my mistake. I'm sorry for that. But we're going over now to malachite, which is the green variety.
Yes.
They also introduced this at the very first stone dial run with the Datejust on the 4-digit ones.
But this is only seen in yellow gold?
Exactly. I've never seen, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. It's very unusual, unlikely it exists, because if it does, we would have probably seen it.
True.
But I've never seen a yellow gold malachite ever. They continued using it on the Day-date and the Datejust with the 5-digit references in many varieties, either with the T-Swiss T or the Swiss, etc. But this is one of the most fragile stone dials. Like from
Apparently, how come? It's just a thin.
I think we had like 4 or 5 malachites that we purchased out of the, I 30 to 40 we've seen, because the other ones were all cracked.
Yeah.
It's just very hard to find proper
You
ones.
can always be assured that one has a crack or a hairline in
Yeah,
it when
yeah.
you look at them.
Exactly.
We did sell a beautiful example, I think about 6 months ago. That was amazing.
I think that might have been the only perfect one I've
We've
seen.
ever come across. Yeah.
No, I've seen in the last 3 years for sure.
Gee, that was
Only
that was
perfect
amazing.
one. So always check them out in real life, because you really need to.
That's the thing with stone dials, I would
Yeah.
say, the condition. The condition has to be perfect, no hairlines around the apertures or around the hands.
Well, if you want a way cheaper one,
Yeah,
but it's
that's
only
okay.
going to get worse. So if it's imperfect, in 10 years it will be more imperfect. So that's the hard part there. So I would rather pay a little bit more and go for a perfect one. But it depends on the deepness of your pockets, I guess.
That's what we prefer as well to add to our collection, is a perfect dial.
Yeah.
It's not always possible, of course, but
Now, if you're ready for some controversy, Obsidian.
here we go. Okay,
Please.
so I have seen it in the Rolex catalog.
Mm-hmm.
It exists. The name exists.
Yes.
Now, lately we've been talking about it for I think over a year now. That Obsidian is not the one we see online. The ones we see online is not necessarily real from the Rolex catalog. I don't think it's the Obsidian that I believe it's not the Obsidian that Rolex means.
No, they didn't intended this to be Obsidian.
True.
And I have to apologize there, because I also added some fire to the fume, calling it Obsidian. We've handled only two, one in white gold and one in yellow gold.
Yes.
So
It's a
I
cool
have
thing, but
it's very
yeah.
cool, but it's basically more like a tropical onyx. So we firstly mentioned the chrysocolla and the combination of the glue with the base dial. That's not precious metal.
Yes.
That's just discoloring of this slab.
Yeah. Around the points where they're always blue.
Exactly, and therefore you can really see the same patterns occurring over and over again. And it was regarded as Obsidian, which I also contributed to give that name a platform.
Yeah.
So perhaps my apologies. I'm not sure if I'm.
Still, you come across it. And
We
you
haven't
don't
seen one in a couple of years. I would like to study it again, but you see them pop up now once in a while. I do still think they're very beautiful because of this discoloring. You see also the depth. You can really see the printing laying on top.
Yes.
So it's very cool to see, and there's certainly value in there. Just like for some people, they love tropical dials.
Yeah.
Some people, they hate tropical dials, and for some people it's worth 30k extra or 20% extra if it has discoloration, and for some other people it's a deal breaker or it's worth less.
I think in the vintage Rolex world, we can definitely give a platform to production faults.
Yeah.
Production faults are appreciated by some and hated by others. I mean,
Well said.
yeah. So I think in that way we can definitely see the value in this.
Yeah. Yeah, and they are unique and they are discolored over time. So that's also kind of cool. I'm not sure if it's entirely stable once you have the dial, so it can even discolor more over time, I guess.
Might evolve.
But I came up with this theory that I discussed, and Eric Kuhl later on also apparently shared my experience, that Patek also made these stone dials, for example, on the Ellipse. They made the Onyx Dial and Lapis Dial. And we've had an Onyx Dial Ellipse with the same discoloration. And I was like, wow, this looks like Obsidian. But on the piece of paper, it really says Onyx Dial. And then I noticed this discoloration only happens on Swiss signed dials instead of Sigma, Swiss Sigma. And the Sigma dials had a gold base plate. So perhaps it's a chemical reaction in combination with a non-precious metal base plate that causes this discoloration.
That is a good theory because you see it kind of come back at the same period and at the same spots.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that might be the case. So it's not Obsidian, the one we know, but they do mention Obsidian in the Rolex catalog.
Yes.
The one they have is, in my humble opinion, I've never handled it, so I'm not sure what the stone is, but it looks more like tiger iron.
Look like tiger patterns as well.
Yeah, it's a stone called tiger iron. That's what I think it is, but I've never had one. They have the Roman numerals around. They're pretty cool. I think Don Vintage Watches has one, or he sold one.
Yeah.
I discussed with him too.
That's the official labeled Obsidian dial.
Yeah,
by Rolex.
Yeah, exactly, as you can see in the master catalogs and stuff.
Yes.
Going to the next one, which is Onyx. Again, way more rare in white gold. They're way more valuable. They started already with Onyx dials, both white gold and yellow gold on the 4-digit, the Datejust, and then later on it continued on the DayDate and the Datejust. And we've had many, and we're a lover of them.
Absolutely.
They're beautiful, but not so rare as one might think.
No, I think it's,
depending on the configuration, of course.
Yeah.
Rubellite we discussed when we talked about the Groschuller. It's the difference between the two. Now the sodalite is an interesting one because it's executed for the stainless steel models.
Yes.
And this is
The blue.
by heart the only one, just from the top of my head, I think it's the only one that was made actually for the steel ones instead of for the gold ones, because all the other ones are made for the precious metal.
Yeah.
And the sodalite is light blue. It looks similar like lapis, but a little bit lighter. So the sodalite, we've had one with white printing and we've had one with black printing, depending on the color. If it's very dark sodalite, they use the white printing. Very light sodalite, they use the dark printing.
So Rolex did decide last minute perhaps what they were going to use for printing on the dials.
Yeah, depending on the color.
Okay.
Because they're natural products, so they all vary, right?
Yes.
Lastly, we're gonna end with the Tiger Eye dial, which is
very nice.
beautiful. It has the chatoyance, so depending on how the light hits it, it shows a different color.
Yes.
It's beautiful. I love the Tiger Eye, and they're one of the most affordable ones. They're also not super rare, but they started out in the 4-digit Datejust and then continued in the later generations, both Datejust and DayDate. They do not exist as far as we know, and I don't think they do exist in white gold varieties, unfortunately. Would be also very cool. Lastly, very important, we're gonna talk about some fake dials. Opal has never been uncovered a real opal. There have been some fraudulent opals. It is listed in the dial code chart, but perhaps it was only optional for some lady models or, for example, non-oyster casing. So we haven't seen a Datejust or a DayDate in 36mm with an opal dial. Again, the one that was sold on auction was fraudulent. Turquoise, they reintroduced that, I think, recently. Yes, but vintage turquoise dials, there are many fakes out there, but haven't ever seen a real one, so be careful for that. And regardless, you have to be mindful because there are many more fake stone dials.
I think it's funny that we could maybe start about a personal experience we've had not too long ago, or quite some time ago, that we were contacted by a fake dial producer, offering us the production of fake stone dials. He sent us some videos, pictures, made a whole sales pitch to us about selling fake dials.
Yeah, and it was scary because they were quite good. I mean, like 3 years ago, also the prices were way lower, so it wasn't so interesting, and it was quite labor intensive to fake these dials. So I think 3 years ago, we've never had a fake dial offered, and in the past 3 years, we've seen an exponential growth in fake dials being offered and even sold on auctions or with other big dealers. Sometimes they're not in the know either, because we've had a couple offered from trustworthy people, but they weren't aware they were incorrect.
They happened to be incorrect.
But this dial maker that made these dials, he really did a great job, because like the cheap fake ones, they always have the second generation apertures because they're just easier to produce. The font is way off, the texture of the print is way off.
Which are things we notice. I would say
yes, but on the cheap ones, everybody, well, not everybody, but it's easy to notice. Yes. But they're becoming way better, let's say, and they started out using like some paste to pretend it's a stone, but these dial makers, so the fake ones, they actually make it from a real stone. Yeah. And the production process is rather similar towards the production process of Rolex. So that was quite interesting to see. And he actually, because we pretended to be interested, he actually sent us he actually sent us the videos of how it's being made and stuff like that, which is great information to have.
We'll show that in the video. Yeah. It's scary to see.
For sure. Unfortunately, we can't show everything regarding how to authenticate it, because if you do that, the people that want to get advantage of it, want to make advantage of it, they will look at our video and see, okay, so now they can see it because of this or that, or you know. So you have to be a little bit mindful about sharing all the information. But it's very...
By the seller.
By the seller. And of course, it's very important to, I don't know what I want to say. Stay vigilant, sure. Yeah. Stay vigilant.
That concludes this video. I hope you enjoyed it. A lot of information. Please leave a comment below in what you would like to see next time. Jasper, thank you for your elaborate information as a gemologist.
With pleasure.
Which is very handy.
Again, I want to say, this was on quite short notice. So these are the most we handled. I did it at the top of my head.
Yes, true.
There's no proper guideline out there yet. I have it in my personal information, but I didn't line it out yet. So if I forgot a variant or whatever, my apologies. But these are the ones known in 36mm Datejust and DayDate again. So we left out the ones for the Daytona or the Lady models or the King Midas or that kind of stuff.
Datejust.
Yeah, and we even stuck to Rolex because of course many other brands use it. Piaget is a well-known user of stone dials. You have Patek Philippe, you have Vacheron Constantin, you have Cartier, etc. Even Frédéric Constant is of course jumping on the bandwagon. Now it's,
we saw that
now it's becoming popular. Of course, Frédéric Constant, the Dutch shame, has to copy it. And I understand everybody tries to look at the trends
jump on the success.
But Frédéric Constant has to be the least inspiring and pioneering brand there is. Unfortunately, the heritage is Dutch, and I was mind-boggled. Like it's also 30K. It's basically they're selling very expensive fakes. Copies, not fakes, copies.
They're jumping on the bandwagon.
Like always they do.
Perhaps a good excuse to maybe make a KOV video about stone dials.
Oh, I thought about Frédéric Constant.
No, about Frédéric Constant, that would also be funny.
Yeah, I did some collection reviews that featured a lot of stone dials, so check out those KOV videos.
That's true.
But I haven't made one specifically about stone dials yet.
Maybe in the future.
Sure.
People, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Leave a comment below with what you'd like to see or what did you want to have questions about. Like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.
So because it's on such short notice, I've, as expected, forgot one, which is ammonite. It's a million-years-old dial. It's basically fossil, and they made it in two varieties. So the earlier fossil dials, they have in a darker color and like a anthracite color and a gray color, only made for yellow gold with second generation Perchers and the 11 diamond markers, or they're actually 10 of course because the
the window, the date window.
So date, and later on they made ammonite, only one variety with the 9 and 6 as diamonds, which we also had. They're more pronounced mollusks in there. It's a little bit different looking than the other fossil dial. So basically ammonite is regarded as a different one as fossil, but basically they're both fossils.
Very nice though.
Sorry for forgetting.
Happens.